It's great to be back with you all here at the crowd. As Jim was saying, and he said a lot of what I wanted to say in his intro, so I'll keep this very brief. This is a continuation, if you like, of the conversation we were having a few weeks ago with John Brown on connected leadership. His rather scary theory of a serious breakdown in the relationship between business and society, and that 30% of the value of a company is at stake, etc., etc. Given the makeup of this audience, and Jim touched on this, most of you probably remember his rather draconian view on the CSR function, its rather shaky future in its current form. Notably, though, Lord Brown in his book stops short of the how specifically to bring society into a business's decision making. So tonight we're going to focus more on that, and hopefully you'll walk away feeling a little bit more positive and a little bit clearer on where you fit in to the decision making process. As Jim mentioned, we're going to look at how we should measure impact, whether business is good enough yet at understanding the relationship, and the role of the business / charity partnership. So that is where we will go. We've got a fantastic panel for you as well to discuss that. A sustainability director at a global drinks business, a director from the philanthropic arm of a big bank or financial services company, I should say, an external affairs director from a global coffee shop, and the CEO of a 230-year-old charity. They are all with me now. And what I'm going to do, as I usually do, is just very quickly go round, and then we'll open it up into a discussion. Then we'll bring it over to you, of course, for Q&A. Anna Swaiths is Director of Sustainable Development, SAB Miller. You wrote a blog, I think it was today, actually, your blog, stressing the importance of people, of emotion, of the human story, as well as the numbers in trying to measure this. Just give us a sense first of what you think is more important.
Thank you, and hi everyone. It's really good to be here tonight, and what a great piece of context setting for us all. So yes, I did write a blog talking about the importance of the human dimension, and the reason I wrote it was actually when I was first invited to join this panel, and so many of the conversations that I'm invited to join at the moment, it feels as though we can very quickly get into this tunnel of talking about measuring social impact and measuring numbers, and what on earth are we going to count, and how do we turn these things into dollars, and you know, how can we come up with a scorecard? And I suppose from my point of view, from my experience working with SAB Miller and before that with Cadbury and Kraft, the single most important thing, first of all, in the decision-making process is really to take that step back and say, well, actually, not first of all, what are we going to count, but what's our, in development terms, what's our theory of change? In business terms, what's our business case here? And when I say business case, I don't mean what's the investment you put in and what's the profit you get out. I mean, what's the rounded picture of what we think we're trying to achieve here? And the way I've seen that playing out in business decision making is that as soon as you bring into that picture, not just, well, what is the financial outcome going to be, and what's the impact for our employees and our brands and our sales potential going to be, and how's it going to help us to manage risk, but actually, what's the impact on people going to be of doing these things?
Yeah.
It sparks a completely different, it brings to life a different part of the brain, doesn't it? And that's as true for senior execs or board members as it is for any of the rest of us. And if you can get those people into the conversation, I think it enables you to have a very different conversation about what it is that we're trying to achieve. And you can then come back to the question of, okay, and so how are we going to measure if we're successful when you've agreed that sort of thing?
We'll delve a little bit more into this when we open it up to discussion. One question I have for you. SAB Miller is seen as a leader, I think, in social activities. You're in the process of being acquired by AB InBev, which is not seen as such a leader. Is it going to be tougher now to sell your message to the board of this combined company, would you say? Is that one of your worries? Is that what keeps you up?
And I actually lived through the Cadbury Kraft transaction as well, so I obviously attract major corporate takeovers wherever I go. But I think you have to look at this as an opportunity. So, I mean, I'm not sitting here to judge SAB Miller and AB InBev's relative strengths. As far as I see it, there's a huge opportunity for a new set of people coming together to think about what's the role that the biggest beer company in the world should be playing, and how do we set up a strategy that enables us to deliver that. So I think wherever there's risk, there's also opportunity, and my job is to create as much opportunity as possible.
Okay.
Whatever plays out.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna. Charlotte, Keenan is Executive Director at Goldman Sachs, a Director of Citizenship, the philanthropic arm of Goldman Sachs. I mean, to Anna's point, I mean, it is about selling this message to often very cynical, skeptical people, isn't it?
It is. But, and I actually joined Goldman Sachs relatively recently, and one of the reasons that I did was I was attracted by the power of the programs and the change that we have on the ground. So you can start with a cynical message, and then you actually meet people that have benefited and participated in our programs just as they would have yours. And actually we've got one of our graduates, and I can't see Stephen Bediako here tonight, just one fantastic example.
Mm-hmm.
And actually that's when you see that change has happened, and that you get organisations like ours who can come together with partners, with others, and really bring our convening power, our capital innovation to some of the world's greatest problems.
I imagine Goldman Sachs, along with most financial services firms, are very good at measuring things and keeping abreast of the financials. Is there a business case for this?
We do it. I have the wonderful job that we do it entirely philanthropically, but it's smart economics. We don't do it just because we want to do it. For us, it's our commitment to society. It's our commitment to the major markets in which we work. So we have a signature entrepreneurship program in the UK and the US, 10,000 small businesses. We have our sister program, 10,000 Women, which is in 54 emerging markets around the world. And for us, we look at it that if we are creating opportunity, if we are growing jobs, that's a good thing for society, and that's a good thing for us as well. And
Yep.
it's something that we think it plays to the strength of our people internally, to the point of the lecture. Our people can identify with this, and they know what to do.
Is Goldman Sachs in the top 100? Do you know?
I think it
Is it? Okay. I think Thomson Reuters is as well, actually. Right, okay. You know, I'm going to miss you out for a second, Chris. I'm going to come on to Simon Redfern, VP of Corporate Affairs at Starbucks. Starbucks generally regarded, of course, as a very good corporate citizen, but has struggled in the wake, and I think this is fair for me to say this, has struggled in the wake of this tax incident. How are you dealing with that? How difficult is it to keep batting that one back when you have a much more positive message to sell?
Yeah, I mean, we, again, as a global company, we have a great ethical sustainability social program, and I think the whole tax debate, the whole issue in the UK, I think we definitely lost trust with our customers at that point, and we, from a global perspective, that was very, very tough because broadly we are seen to be a good actor in most areas of people's lives. And I think the key thing for us was one that customers didn't understand why we weren't paying tax, and we had a big job to do to explain that. And I'm very happy to explain that to anybody that wants to ask me that later. But we also had a responsibility to our employees, and we call them partners. They're all shareholders in the company, and it was a very tough time for them in the UK, very tough indeed. And these people are passionate about the brand. They joined Starbucks because they want to work as part of a team, but also they believe in the values and the ethos of the company, and that took a bit of a knock at that point.
Yep.
So it was very, very critical for us to regain the initiative.
So talk to us a little bit about Neighbourly, which Jim mentioned, and I guess this is one of the ways you are trying to move the focus off that crisis and onto something more positive.
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware it's a long game to rebuild a reputation when everybody, including every single taxi driver in London, has heard you don't pay tax. And the fact is that we do pay tax. We pay exactly what we're supposed to pay in corporation tax. Paid a lot last year, paid a lot the year before, and we'll continue to do as we now are profitable, which is great news. But when I joined Starbucks, I focused on the social responsibility program that we have. And it was very disparate. So we had a big charity, but we also had our partners in their stores doing their own thing. So they were passionate about a local charity, whether that be Deborah Skin Conditions, or whether that be local hospice, or the local community cafe. All of those things were happening, and we didn't really know what was going on. So occasionally you would get a great set of photos from a local store saying, hey guys, we did this brilliant local event, it was fantastic. And our leadership team would go, wow, it's awesome. Why are we not, celebrating more of this stuff? And it was a constant thing that was coming into my inbox. People saying, look, why don't we talk about this more? Why don't we do more? So when Nick and Luke from Neighbourly sat down with us, and it was recommended as a meeting to me by my US colleague, it's suddenly every single light just went on. This is a perfect platform for us. And Nick won't thank me for this, but it's like a dating agency. So you kind of you have a web platform, you have a local project that really wants to work with a big corporate. You have a big corporate that's saying, hey, we want to do education, we want to work on this.
Right. Okay, very good. Simon, thank you very much indeed. Finally, Chris Wright, Chief Executive, Catch-22. Founded, I think I got it right, about 230 years ago, a charity that helps people in very difficult situations. You work a lot with big corporate partners, a lot of the big financial services companies. What does business and charity want from each other? I imagine there's a lot of room for distrust there.
Hello. I guess, we're an organisation who are trying to run and deliver public services in a whole range of ways, from delivering education to kids who get excluded from mainstream schools to working with people coming out of custody or in the criminal justice system. And I think we're in an interesting environment. Economically speaking, I don't buy into austerity equals gloom and doom. I think we're in a kind of new economics which requires us to think much more imaginatively about how public services can be organised and delivered. And I think that creates a space for thinking much more imaginatively about how we fund those services. What does philanthropy look like? What does corporate social responsibility look like? What does sustainability look like? And I don't think it's the responsibility of the state to create all those conditions in which people can live peaceably alongside one another. I think this stuff about purpose is quite relevant. If you want to have good markets, you need people who can participate in those markets. I think that's the space we should try and find a way of operating together within.
Give us a quick take on your view on measuring this. We'll go into a little bit more detail in a second, but what's your first take on this? The way this is measured, how it's measured, can it be measured?
I'm a time-served public servant, spent a lot of my time in the public sector, and I would argue don't do it like that, because measurement is, becomes very quantitative, input-orientated, measuring inputs, outputs, and it leads to a whole range of transactional services. So, Anna's opening point around people, we're about engaging people, building relationships. We're interested in creating services which are all relational and not transactional. And the danger with measurement can be that you measure things which are relatively easy to measure, as opposed to quite complex social interactions, which are. But it's the same kind of stuff Alex was talking about. Customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction. Those are the things that we're interested in. How can we engage with people we work with, so you can help them navigate their way through their difficulties? So I'm a little bit sceptical about measurement as a sledgehammer. A few years ago, when all the rage around social investment kicked off, I think many social investors were very concerned about making the right decisions around their investment, and they wanted to see your evidence base, and they became very focused on evidence-based programs with randomized controlled trial evaluations, which might have worked in a jurisdiction in the States, but not necessarily in downtown Durham.
Okay, thank you very much, all of you. A general question before we get on to the how. How much, given you look at all these trust barometers, the Edelman trust barometers, other trust barometers that have been coming out over the last few weeks, how much change can we actually expect from business in terms of them bringing society into this equation? I mean, we heard John Brown talk about it, but I'd be interested just to get your general view first on how much change we can really expect.
I actually think a great deal. And I mean, I was in our industry, heavily regulated industry, your industry, another heavily regulated industry.
Can everyone hear Anna, by the way? No, I think that might be, there you go, pull it. There you go, try that.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Go ahead.
No, so I was making a point about the correlation between, or between trust and how trust can very quickly translate into something that businesses certainly do fear, which is regulation. So I think trust is incredibly important for business because actually it's an early indicator of which way the tide is turning. And actually, if the trust indicator is up, well, that's a good sign. Regulators are watching that. Your consumers are watching that. It's a good sign for all of those other metrics of business. If the trust metrics are going in the wrong direction, well, very quickly other things start to change that over time limit your ability to operate, your ability to grow.
Yeah.
So I think as a business, it's critical.
Let's talk specifically about your sector and the trust piece, Charlotte. How hopeful are you that we can expect lasting, sustainable change?
I'm also very hopeful. Otherwise, I wouldn't do the work that we do day in, day out. And I think one of the roles that business can play here, and as we like to think about it, is we can build. We have the luxury of building programs and models that create the evidence base, and then that's where partnerships become so absolutely vital because we're never going to do this on our own. But we can bring some unique things to the table, work with others, and then actually build the multiplier effect of the work that we're doing. That I think is pretty significant. So even when I look at the time span of some of the programs that we've been running, actually it helps people identify what Goldman does. Otherwise, we can be we bring it to around the UK to things that people can identify with. So a huge amount.
How optimistic are you, Sam?
I'm very optimistic as well, actually. I think, I'm seeing it happening around me. And, it's a real privilege to watch it sometimes. Particularly led from our US team where, we have a very visionary leader in Howard Schultz who is really trying to change the way that companies are run. Yes, it's got to be performance driven, but, it also has to be about doing the right thing for your fellow human beings. And, he is very clear on that fact, performance, but through the lens of humanity, which is, I know very US. But it is absolutely.
Do chief executives, and this to all of the corporates, the chief executives buy this 30% number that McKinsey has thrown into the ring? 30% of the value is at stake if you don't get to grips with this. Does the chief executive of today get that? Does the chief financial officer of today get that?
Well, I'm not seeing that. I see people that really believe that there is a real purpose to this business, and it is beyond. It is about coffee, but it is about people, and it's about in a lot of ways. Alex, really touched a chord for me, where he talked about your employees, because actually where we have the greatest success is where we're rolling out programs that really benefit our employees. Howard is famous for having brought in a program that gave everybody free health insurance if they worked over 20 hours a week in 1983. And that was transformative for Starbucks' reputation in the US. You can now work for a college degree for 4 years in the US. We're now bringing a rent deposit scheme in the UK if you move house. These things actually have a massive flywheel effect on the reputation of the business outside of your own partner base.
Let's move on to measuring the impact, and we talked about it, and Alex talked about it as well. But I'd be interested to hear all of your views, and let's start with you, Chris, on this. I asked at the beginning how to get this message across to cynical or skeptical CFOs, the money guys. But selling the human story, the emotion is equally important. Is the message I'm getting? Is that message getting through, do you think? Is the story being told correctly?
I think this is kind of an emerging kind of theme, I guess, and people out there probably know better than I, but it seems to me that there's a danger organisations like ours will be become a kind of supply chain partner of a corporate that has a kind of real commitment to doing something good, but then will tell us what it is they want to do. And we don't get into kind of, co-creation and co-production of the kind of solutions. We get told, well, this is what our agenda is, and we're good at doing this, and we know about this, and we're going to ask you to do it. And then we all go, along with it because we want the resources. I think we've got to get into a much more intelligent conversation about what it is we're trying to do, and understand where the knowledge and the expertise is about how you can achieve some of the ambitions that business signs up to.
Yeah. How? Feel free to jump in, by the way, anyone, if you want to. But how easy is it to have that intelligent conversation, with the right people in your company, for example?
So hopefully this mic is now working. So what I've learned about the best way to have that conversation is to figure out, well, who is it you're talking to and what is their primary interest? And then how can you bring some kind of insight that's of real relevance to what it is that they're most interested in into that conversation? And that's your entry point and the starting point to talking about the sort of big... So I wouldn't go and talk to a sales director or a marketing director about, here's a video of a poor farmer in Uganda, let's think about how we can have some impact on them. I would go to them with a great video from a small-scale customer that they sell our product through, providing some real insight that they don't yet have into that customer that really, opens up their mind to thinking how we might work in a completely different way with small-scale customers to have both an impact on our future potential to grow with those customers and on the social impact that we have for those people and their families. So I think it's really thinking smartly. We've started to use much more sort of insights, needs assessment in the same way we would with consumers. We don't launch a new product without going out and understanding what consumers want. We've started to think in the same way about other people in our value chain around our business and trying to hear their voices and bring their voices in order to make good decisions.
Do you have to, though, make that connection for some people? In the CFO's office or the finance director's office, that if you get that human piece, in the long run, we will benefit financially. Do you have to make that connection? Do you have to make it that obvious for them?
Yes, we do make that connection, but I think in our business, I guess we're really quite lucky. I think the majority of our senior execs, they get this because we've got great examples around the business of these kinds of business models that have delivered social impact and profit over a period of years. So they've seen it happen. And so then I suppose that creates a level of receptiveness to other ideas that are about creating a dual profit social impact benefit. They know it can happen. We've proved it before, and I can talk more later on about a few examples of that.
Okay. Charlotte, do you spend most of your time talking numbers with these people in terms of a credible measurement, or do you spend most of your time telling them human stories?
Both, and I think it has to be the quantitative and the qualitative. So we're a bank, as you said it, we measure everything, so we will know, exactly how many jobs we've created, the revenues of the companies that we're working with and how that's changed. But critically, it's the human stories, and it's the voices, and it's the company that was struggling, and then they came through our program, and now they've grown 3, 4, 5 times, and the two together, I think, really come through, and that's what makes the case internally. I think the other thing that's important, and this is and I suspect it's the same in your organisations, is the millennial dimension.
Yeah.
And the hunger, and we're seeing it time and time, and really increasing, is the hunger within the firm for people to want to be involved, that they want to offer up their skills, and it becomes a critical component for motivating and attracting some of our brightest.
Chris, is that a big part of this momentum? The millennials, a generation of energetic, smart people who get this.
I think that's our experience, actually. We get a lot of people coming to us because they want to work for us, because they're committed to social justice, but they're also kind of entrepreneurial and enterprising. And there's I don't know to what extent this is, but I guess we're seeing a bit of a flow from McKinsey's into Catch-22, not the other way, but it's interesting. I think people are really committed to this kind millennial idea, people are much more committed to the good society. And whether they work for me is irrelevant, really. If they're working and doing things and contributing, I think we're going to have that environment I mentioned earlier is going to be much more susceptible to
doing more purposeful work, right?
Yeah.
It's a goal for a lot of these people. Do we have to wait until these people are in the CFO's chair before we really see change?
I don't know. I mean,
Because that's going to happen, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think that's right. And I think, I think there's definitely a generation of people coming through that want to make a great, bone dry cappuccino, but then ask what's next. What else? What else are you doing? You're a great company. What else can I do? And that's where things like Neighbourly really, really work for us, in that we've got these great projects that people can go and take part in, volunteer, and we can fund from the centre, which has made a huge difference to the way we operate. But yeah, I think that millennial hunger is critically important for us. But it's a settled matter at board level. So that conversation is done. So I don't have to now sell a CSR program, because it's like, well, where's your CSR program? It's not like, sell me the CSR program. That's already done. What isn't settled is this whole issue around results. The fact is that I can probably get away with, the status quo, which is, I can see people are doing some great stuff out there, brilliant. But what I can now do with Neighbourly is actually start to put some numbers by that, and actually, rather than just show photos of very smiling, happy faces, digging things, to actually kind of, to actually put some numbers behind who participated and how much bandwidth we got in terms of PR and media and all of that stuff as well, which is just helpful in taking it to the next level.
Yeah, it brings me on to the World Business Council for Sustainable Development and this, what is it called, the Social Capital Protocol. And I believe, Anna, that you've had some input into this. Is it a good idea? Is it something that's well, tell us first what it is, and tell us whether you think it's a good idea and something that's going to become universally adopted.
Okay. So I'm not sure how well placed I am to tell you exactly what it is, but we have had some involvement, and I think WBCSD really set out to think through, well, what is this concept of social capital? What does it mean, and how can it be useful for businesses and other organisations in thinking through this area of social impact and interaction with people? I guess there's some borrowing there from the natural capital agenda that was very much about looking at how to really quantify impacts on natural resources, and then how to take that further step and turn them into monetary values, financial values. I think logically there's huge sense in doing that. The challenge behind it is when those dollars actually are notional dollars, effectively. They never hit a real bottom line. They never hit a real balance sheet. They're useful as comparisons of the relative effectiveness or the relative impact of one initiative versus another, but they don't actually hit a bottom line. You cannot bring them into a financial conversation in the same way as dollars that really do hit the bottom line. So they have a limitation, right? And I think the social capital work has very quickly seen that and learnt that, but actually taken a broader approach to thinking about the concept of social capital, and actually what are the other ways in which decision-making around social impacts can be influenced, where, quantification and potentially monetization is one, but it's really just one in a sort of suite of ways. I definitely don't think it can be the only answer.
I mean, Charlotte, could you see Goldman adopting a standardized methodology like this, particularly if as we were just hearing, it's difficult to translate this into the bottom line and numbers?
I'm not sure. I mean, what I would say is that for certainly all of the programs and the way that we look at it, everything has to be, I think, for it to work, bespoke. And each program is different. Each project that you do, what are you trying to achieve, and how are you going to get there, and therefore how are you going to know that you've actually got there. So I'm always a little bit wary about drawing a kind of a banner approach to measurement. I think it has to be individually tailored.
Okay. What about a standardized? Do you like this idea of standardized methodology?
Instinctively, I'm with you, Charlotte.
I mean, for me, looking again with a layperson's hat from the outside, it allows companies to compare what they're doing and success rates, or no?
I mean, there are some elements of, and every company in here will know that, you have that kind of day where everybody goes volunteering and you try and make that a valuable opportunity. So rather than painting walls, we now have a load of young people into the support centre, and we go through kind of interview training skills and how we got to where we were and all that stuff. And that is measurable, because that's happening right the way across the world at the same time in the same month, and everyone is doing it within the business. I think where it's more difficult is where you've got, I've got people saying, let's do this, let's try that. We have a veterans charity in Northumberland, and we've got Sea Cadets in Aberystwyth. We've got sign language in the Jubilee Place store in Canary Wharf. We've got all sorts of stuff going on, and it's just really hard to say, okay, how do you measure that? It's so different.
Yeah. Do you want to say something, Sean?
No, I'm just in
you're nodding.
total
You're in agreement. Okay, let's go. I said I promised we'd look at the how, which I think we didn't go too much into, if at all, really 3 or 4 weeks ago with John Brown. So let's look at the how and how you could bring society into mainstream business areas. And I'd be interested to hear some examples, specific examples from each of you, how you are doing that. Anna, let me start with you. For example, if you're building a new bottling plant, how do you look at the impacts on communities?
So I think the big shift that we've made over the past sort of 3 to 4 years is really to move away from, in the past what we would have done when we built a new plant was to then say, well, okay, we need to make sure we invest a proportion of profits or whatever into community projects. So let's figure out the right community projects. The shift we've made is to say, no, we're not just going to allocate a pot of money and put it into something that feels good. We're actually going to understand what's the connection between our business and the people who live around it and the people in our value chain, and how can we direct those same dollars to having a far greater impact because we're doing it in a way that connects to our business. So a great example would be, we establish a new brewery, one of the first things we look at is where are we going to source our raw materials from? What can we source locally? How can we buy from local farmers, create a local supply chain that actually creates a new source of income? In many of our markets in Africa, it's farmers who've never had a source of income before. Yeah. They were growing a crop of subsistence, connect them, include them into our supply chain. You then start a track of development opportunity for those farmers to formalize, start to have demonstrable earnings that they can take to banks in order to be able to raise funding to invest back into farms. You start a sort of chain of development, which if we just invest into a nice project in that community, you don't have that same kind of domino effect. So that's how we go about it. We look at our value chain and we look at, well, so what is it that we can do in that value chain that actually creates impact for those people, but it's actually doing that through creating a business opportunity for us, because those raw materials are going to enable us to produce an affordable beer that we can sell to local consumers and that we can then grow our business through doing.
Yeah. Simon, how do you track the issues that matter to society? And do they play a really big role in Starbucks decision making?
We do a lot of listening. So we listen to our people, really. I mean, that is a classic millennial audience. You have, most of our employees, 50% are under 25 and 70% are under 30. So you get a very clear sense as to what is a priority for people from those conversations, and that is either through our measuring, in terms of our partner pulse, or through just conversations that we're having on the ground. And you get so in the US, for example, education is seen to be a really critical path for them to go down. So that's where the College Achievement Program is hugely successful. Here, our sense was that it was much more about cost of living. And actually, that's why we went down the rent deposit loan route, which was to say, if you move flat, we'll pay your deposit up front, and you can very slowly, interest-free, pay us back. That has, again, gone down really well. So I think we're getting better at it. It's not scientific yet, for God's sake, but we're getting there.
And you know why I'm asking you, because let's face it, 5 years ago, tax minimization, we didn't think tax minimization was an issue that really bothered people out there, but clearly it was an issue that really bothered people out there, and you've learned a lesson as a result of that. How have you changed the way you take into account what bothers society on the back of that?
Well, I mean, I think that was really the big one for us. I mean, I don't think it gets much tougher in terms of the amount of attention we got on us for that particular issue. I think that as I say, the only way back from that is to just relentlessly do the right thing, and take it on the chin. We know that was a tough moment. We did not get our story out well, and we are doing that, and we're changing. I think the only way through it is to show that we're doing the right thing, show that we listen to our customers, and we listen to our employees and fix the problem.
Yeah, okay. Charlotte, sort of same sort of question to you. I'm not going to touch on tax in financial services, but the reputation banks have on the back of the crisis, and all the fallout from that. How much of that are you spending a lot of your time batting back as you try and put out a more positive story?
Well, many of the programs that we started in 2008, 2009, really off the back of the financial crisis. But I mean, we've been doing it for years and decades before that, very, very much ingrained. So I'm lucky because I'm on the front foot of the positive side, and actually, taking your point that we have to be responsive to our stakeholders in this field. And I think this is where a corporate, in thinking about its work in this field, we know what we can do, but then we have to match that to where the demand is and what's needed.
And Chris, I assume it's okay with you if companies minimise their tax payments, so long as they're investing heavily into programs like yours, right?
No.
Or is that unfair?
I think they can do both, can't they? It's it's either or. But what we're interested, we did really well a couple of years ago from a large bank who wanted to make a big investment in us to do something really important around employability for young people, and we welcomed the investment. And they set a number of targets that we had to deliver against, and we had a number of people who went through the program. And you could have looked at it just like that and said, right, here we are, I've got a program, we're going to fund the program, and we feel better about ourselves, and you're doing some good work. But we use the money to build our own capability to become better at providing employability services for all the people we work with. So we used it as a real investment in our organisation to grow. And that's the kind of debate I'm interested in having. Most people in this room, if you want to grow your businesses, you go through the normal routes, issue shares, you borrow, whatever. Organisations like ours, we're much more constrained in how we can grow, and we have to find investment in a different way. And so I'm really interested in not being prescribed programs, but entering into a dialogue which allows CSR money or good business decisions to invest in organisations like ours, so that we can deliver better quality public services at the local level.
Is that, and again, we'll come on to the partnership piece in a second, but is that the sort of message you're hearing from charities you work with?
Yes, and we work with, not just charities, partners are the cornerstone of all of our programs, because we can't do it all. And we, to your earlier point, that you don't just want someone coming in and saying, we want X and here's the money. That doesn't work either. We work with partners because we want the innovation, we want the brains, we want the expertise. And I think that's where you really see the strengths of corporate, charitable, academic, partnerships coming together, because we all do some things different. We work with a lot of universities around the UK. We work with over 100 not-for-profits around the world, all in the entrepreneurship field. For us, it's great if we can develop the capacity in other organisations. Absolutely phenomenal. We're delivering a solid programme, but then who knows where we will be funding this in 15, 20 years' time. Yep. But if we've built the local capacity, that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to pick up on the point you were making, Chris, about you mentioned CSR money or good business money, which I thought was a really interesting phrase, because certainly we don't think of most of our investment as CSR investment anymore. It's about business. When we launched a cassava beer in Mozambique or a sorghum beer in Uganda, it wasn't a CSR investment. It was a business investment in business growth that would in tandem bring a social benefit. And I think the partners that we in the future will be working with are the ones that recognise that and are looking to work with our core business operations, not with our CSR money, but actually to figure out, which does bring some of the risk that you mentioned in your introductory comments as well, the risk around, well, are they just going to tell us what to do and they just want another supply chain partner? So it calls for some tough discussions in those sort of partnerships.
Is that fair?
I think, look, we're all working towards a new way of doing things, and I deliberately use the phrase CSR because it kind of is a bit of an irritant. You put it out there, but there's probably a lot of people in this room who don't think like the traditional orthodox CSR, and more in line with what Anna's saying. But it's not commonplace. These kind of conversations are not commonplace. They're evolving, and we want to be part of we personally want to be part of a conversation which allows us to encourage good business decisions, because they're the right things to do, because you create the conditions in which people, as I said earlier, can participate in the market and the economy, and we create a better and a good society.
I think Jim mentioned this at the top, this idea, and tell me if you think it's too simplistic to look at it in these terms, this idea where business provides the capital and charity is the delivery mechanism. Is it too simplistic to look at it like that?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think it's too simplistic, and I think that's how it probably was if you looked 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I think the challenge now is that we are really looking to NGO partners to work with us to influence strategic decisions. The difficulty with that is, well, that's not about funding delivery. How do you fund strategic input? That makes charity partners actually become another form of strategic advisor, which is much harder to account for and fund.
But realistically though, Chris, can that partnership really work when you've got a bank or a big corporate providing all the funds? Give us your experiences of how welcomed you are into this discussion.
A couple of years ago, we were competing in a large government outsourcing opportunity, and we were competing against some large PLC, BPO organisations, outsourcers, who had very large balance sheets, and we didn't have a large balance sheet. And we passed the PQQ, but I don't think we should have done, because ultimately the decision that was taken was the risk transfer was so great, our balance sheet couldn't swallow the risk. So as we were stumbling our way through this competition, I started knocking on the door of various banks saying, well, can you lend us your balance sheet? So I don't know quite how this would have worked, but provide us with a parent to guarantee the risk that the government felt they would be needing to share, or not share at all, just transfer totally. And it didn't really get very far. No. People weren't that, because of course, I don't know what the legal issues could have been, but I think we could have, we might have been able to find our way in a very different place.
I mean, if Charlotte, if a charity comes to you now and says, can you lend us your balance sheet, what do you say back to them?
As they do frequently.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, I think you need to be aligned on a common mission. And so when we work with organisations who want to do the same thing that we want to do, then I think it works. And I think it's the secret of philanthropy in our organisation, and the secret of it, it is a success and it continuing to be a success, is that it is part of what the bank does, and it's the same thing that we stand for.
But doesn't your bank offer its balance sheet to a range of others? Just in running your business, you're offering your balance sheet, and I'm just coming to you and saying, give us a bit, carry this risk. It's not very much; it's about that much.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't comment on the specifics of the financial transaction, but the kind of the beauty of sitting there with philanthropic dollars is that often then when someone comes to us with a great delivery model or an idea that's aligned with entrepreneurship that helps us change societies better than we can do ourselves, then it's I think, a really exciting
But that,
win-win.
what we just heard is exactly the sort of conversation that needs to be happening, right? Between you two. I mean, that's what we need to see more of. That's what we need to hear more of, if the corporates are going to put their money where their mouth is. Would you agree with that? Is that fair?
It's a conversation I'd like to have.
Yeah, of course,
Yeah,
of course.
obviously.
But is it a conversation the corporates want to have, is my question.
Yeah, I think this is the leap, isn't it? It's the leap from, you know, what is the current kind of orthodoxy, which might be a light year away from where it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I really want to push this with the corporates. You know, why are you all holding back a little bit on this point?
Well, we're not a bank, but I mean, we want to put our people into this as well as money. So I mean, for me, where our programs have worked best is when we've had really engaged partners working in those projects. So, you know, take this veterans charity up in the Northeast. You know, that is now a training program for returning veterans getting jobs in our stores. That would never have happened if Becca Hay, the store manager in that store, hadn't really put her arms around this project with a bit of seed funding from us and made it happen through the whole Neighbourly platform. And that is where we think the sweet spot is, where it doesn't, I mean, it works, but, you know, I can think of countless charities where we've said they've asked for money and we've given them money, but we've had no relationship other than that transaction. And yeah, that's fine, but it doesn't have the same emotional resonance within the business as actually seeing people really get stuck in.
Anna.
Yeah, I think it comes back to the point that Charlotte was making about shared mission or shared purpose. And, you know, it doesn't have to be that the purposes of the two organisations absolutely match, but if you can't come together, if you can come together around a shared objective, put a plan together behind that, well, yes, then it comes, you know, it falls to the corporate to think, well, how do we fund this and how do we make it happen? But if that kind of shared objective and that agreement about what you're trying to achieve isn't there, then fundamentally what's not there is trust. And someone alluded to it at the beginning, that it actually, you end up with mistrust between a business and a corporate partner, I think, if you haven't got that alignment around purpose. So absolutely, I think we put our money where our mouth is, where we see that, yes, there's a shared purpose and we're on the same page, we're trying to achieve the same thing here.
What do you want, Charlotte, what do you want to see more of from the charities?
What I want to see more of? It's a great question. We did a lot of work with the refugee crisis, and actually we can spend a lot of our time understanding where most effectively to deploy money. And I mean, I suppose with charities, I mean, it's about understanding who's able to do what and is doing it best and is doing it most effectively. I mean, I sort of, before this job, I was running a charity, so I can see it from both sides,
yeah.
And kind of, you know, used to pitching to corporates and now the other way around. I mean, again and again, it just comes down to, you know, when you find that fit and you find the partnership and you find the charity that's doing the thing that you're looking to do, and you're going to them because they can do it better than you, and they've got the ideas and the local reach and the talent.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a bit of a missing middle in the charity sector. So I think there are NGOs that do an absolutely brilliant job at putting the spotlight on difficult issues and bringing them to the attention of corporates and you know, really getting us thinking hard about tough issues, whether it's tax or land rights or whatever it might be. And there are, you know, go-to partners to work with if we want to go and deliver a specific project on the ground, you know, with real people in real communities, all great. The issue is in between those two. When the spotlight's been put on a really difficult issue, we don't have the solutions as the corporate sector, and very often the capacity is not there in the charity sector to actually help us come up with the solutions, and we end up in this sort of messy situation of not really knowing quite who it is to work with. So what I'd really love to see is you know, a concerted effort to build that kind of capacity to provide the sort of strategic advice that we're looking for when there are these difficult social issues that we're trying to grapple with.
Yep.
And I'm not sure how that gets funded, because I think there is a problem, there is a conflict of interest if it's funded by the company who's looking for the solution. Clearly, so there's something there around the role of foundations and the role of donors in actually putting some money behind that sort of strategic advice provision.
But these must be conversations that are being had right now, I imagine, right?
Yeah.
They must be. We can't just be having them on this stage.
There are some
Okay.
interesting examples. I mean, I think, you know, one I think that may have touched people in this room actually is Jeremy Hunt and dementia. who, you know, and he has done the circuit, and he's talked to a lot of corporates saying, I want you to be dementia friends, and, you know, train your people to know how to handle a patient or a person that comes in with dementia into one of your stores. And, you know, I think that has been one of the first sort of cases I've seen of real government leadership around a particular issue that, you know, he's passionate about personally, clearly, but also has a great benefit to society as well, and that where people can align and come together. And I guess...
Isn't that just easy? Isn't that what you should be doing? I'm interested in having a debate about which really challenges the status quo. It starts to think very differently. So you start on about tax minimization. Well, one of the reasons, you know, people get into not paying their taxes is because they think, well, they pay too much. Well, one of the reasons they might pay too much is because a lot of our public service delivery isn't very good. And so we're paying tax for failure. Example, if you're 12 and enter our care system, you're more likely to go to prison than you are to university. Yet we spend £7 billion of public money a year on children entering our care system. So I'm interested in saying, well, how do we reform that? 140 years ago, my organisation was the founder of the probation service. So in 1876, a philanthropist gave some money and we created this thing which became the London Police Court Mission and went on to become the probation service. And then it became appropriated by the state, and the state, and many other examples of how public services started within philanthropy, then taken over by the state. And I think we've created a situation now where the orthodoxy is that the state delivers the core, and you guys contribute to additionality, good stuff, really important stuff. But I would like a debate about how do we get into the core? How do we reconfigure what we do on a day-to-day basis? How public money is spent, how it's blended with your money, how it creates the conditions in which we can, you know, work together, create the good society I keep going on about.
Yep.
No, that's the debate.
Yeah,
And-
okay.
and-
Yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
and that's happening in some markets, isn't it? So, I mean, if I take Peru as an example, our business in Peru now has the option to structure some of their tax payments as public services. So to build a bridge or provide whatever public service it might be, because the government's recognised that actually corporates might do a better job at managing certain infrastructure projects and get more value for money out of them. So, I mean, it's relatively early days and there's all kinds of challenges around making a commitment to building a bridge and managing that project through, but it's an interesting model to look at that sort of blended financing.
Right, a reply on that one as well?
I mean, I think to get to the core, and as the president of the Rockefeller Foundation that said this a few years ago, describing philanthropy as risk capital, and the obligation with philanthropic dollars is you can be braver. You don't have the same financial obligations on investment and return. And you can use those dollars to really think about creative solutions. And I think actually that's where the kind of American model versus the European model and the evolution of sort of welfare states is really interesting when you look at the role of philanthropy there. And absolutely, that's where I think, you know, the private sector, government, charities coming together and using foundation dollars with that luxury.
You know, I'm going to stop this bit here because Jim said to me actually earlier on today, look, we could do a whole event on this partnership, and clearly we could because there's so much to be had from this. I'm going to stop it for a second from me. I'm going to give it to the audience to ask their questions now.